Today, we are announcing a 3-year pause on the federal pollution price on heating oil so that we can give everyone the time and ability to switch to heat pumps. One more thing, today we are doubling from 10 to 20% the rural top-up that people get as part of their quarterly pollution price rebates. Because if you live in a rural community, you don't have the same options that people who live in cities do.
A major announcement last hour from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's overhauling his carbon tax policy following outrage largely in Atlantic Canada. Joining me now, one of the Liberal MPs who pushed for the change, Cody Blois. He is the chair of the Liberal Atlantic Caucus. Cody Blois, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks to be here.
So the pause on home heating oil is a national policy. The rural rebate is a national policy. But let's face it, the home heating oil issue is an acute one for Atlantic Canada. The Prime Minister said, we heard you. How much of this is about politics versus policy?
No, look, at the end of the day, this has been something that I've been on the record for the whole time, for the last year and a half, David, of saying we believe in the intent of the carbon price policy, particularly at the federal backstop level, but we wanted to see adjustments, and particularly, as I mentioned in my remarks today, Atlantic Canada is, by and large, a rural region of the country, and with today's announcement, we're finding equity in how we deliver the programs. On the heat pump program specifically, we're going to be working with Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland in a pilot initiative, but it's important for your listeners to know that actually a year ago, we introduced $250 million through the Low Carbon Economy Fund to help people across the country. So yes, today is a further initiative in a part of the country where we're very vulnerable, but there's already federal support to help people elsewhere in the country as well.
There were a lot of MPs there behind the Prime Minister, cite you and a lot of Atlantic MPs. The Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, nowhere to be seen. He was in Ottawa today. He had a news conference at 12:30. Why wasn't the Environment Minister there?
The Environment Minister played a really important role in helping to shape this policy. As I said in my remarks, Jonathan Wilkinson, Chrystia Freeland, those were the 3 departments that were really involved. But as you noticed, it was all Atlantic members of Parliament and the Prime Minister. So I wouldn't read too much into that. And
but people are going to read something into that, don't you think? Not having Ken McDonald sat there and said Stephen Guilbeault was a problem in Atlantic
where was
Canada
Jonathan Wilkinson? Would you suggest Jonathan Wilkinson? I mean, this
he was
is
in Alberta at an energy summit. But I was just wondering, the Environment Minister was in Ottawa today and he wasn't there.
I can promise you that he'll be supportive of this. He played a key role. I worked with him closely, and as I said, our caucus worked closely to make sure that we could deliver for Atlantic Canadians, but indeed all Canadians. And that's the one thing I want to make sure, David, that doesn't get lost in today's announcement. We moved the rural rebate from 10% up to 20%. That matters for people living in foothills in Alberta. That matters for people living in rural Ontario. The program specific to heat pumps is a pilot in Atlantic Canada, but other premiers who want to get on board, I'm sure the Government of Canada would be willing to partner.
Okay, yeah, because there is the base rebate, and then if you live in a rural area, it's a jump of 10%, and now so that top-up is actually 20% on top of it. I want to touch on a couple of things there. You mentioned the heat pump pilot program that is being discussed. Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, PEI. Where's New Brunswick? Are they going to get on board with this?
Great question. I would love to see Blaine Higgs get involved. This matters in New Brunswick as it does in all 4 Atlantic provinces. So that's a question for Blaine Higgs and the Premier and the Government of New Brunswick. But we're willing partners. And as the Prime Minister mentioned, hopefully it will be 4 very soon. And like I said, David, other provinces that want to get involved, I think there's an open olive branch there from the Government of Canada to say, let's make sure we're focused on your needs.
Okay, so the way this is going to work for people who are catching up on this is the Prime Minister said today that they're piloting a program to give free heat pumps to households who make at or below the median household income in Canada. Rough math that varies from province to province was between $60,000 and $70,000. Is that what we're talking about in household income for the region? Is that
sure? Look, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but those that go, in Statistics Canada can find the median income. What it represents is about a $20,000 grant. And you'll remember, David, we rolled out programs of $5,000. We increased that to $10,000 in some cases. But if you're sitting at home, this is about a $20,000 project, and some people have the means to be able to do this. But at the end of the day, we want to be there to help support that transition, and that's exactly why we're working with the provinces to do just that.
So what's the scale of the ambition there? Like how many homes use home heating oil or have inefficient heating sources in Atlantic Canada are below the median income and want to get to a heat pump? Like how many houses are we talking about?
I don't have the exact numbers here, but it's the principles of what we're chasing. As I mentioned in Nova Scotia, David, it's about 40% of households are still on home heating oil. We want to try to take that number as close to 0 as possible because at the end of the day, it's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's also good for affordability, and we're working to help make that transition. One thing I want to mention to your listeners as well, though, it's not just a $20,000 grant, which is essentially a free heat pump for individuals individuals. Any individual above the median income, we're changing the Greening Homes initiative that people can borrow capital up front without spending a dime to be able to make a difference. And I want to contrast this, David, because Pierre Poilievre is in Atlantic Canada right now. And as I said in my remarks, he's not offering solutions. He's channeling people's frustration, anxiety around affordability. He's offering simplistic solutions without the long-term benefit of what the Prime Minister just announced today.
But there is a lot of frustration and anxiety in Atlantic Canada. Every time I go home to St. John's, I'm shocked at how upset people are in a place where the Liberals have always been so strong. So he's tapping into something there, and he's already reacted to this announcement saying, this is only happening because your polls have plummeted. I mean, what's your response to that?
It's happening because the Atlantic Liberal Caucus got involved. And, you know, when you ask that question, when I sat in the House of Commons for 4 years now, the Conservatives don't offer any solutions. They're not interested in keeping any form of carbon pricing. They want to get rid of it altogether. We're of the view, as I've said on record, of walking this midway line of saying we believe in the intent of policy, but it needed to have some adjustments. And that's exactly how the Atlantic Liberal Caucus helped deliver that today.
So I want to touch on something else the Prime Minister said today in the question and answer component of the announcement. The way the rebate system works under carbon pricing is the money that is collected from a specific province, let's use Nova Scotia for example, as the one you know best, is rebated. And 8 in 10 people do better than make out better than they lost. But he said today, because of the pause on the carbon tax on home heating oil, they will be taking in less money over the next 3 years, so the base rebate will go down. Now, I know this is partially offset in the rural areas because of the doubling of the subsidy from 10% to 20%, but this means people in Halifax who may burn oil are going to get a smaller rebate than people in, say, Cape Breton, which would fit into the rural area based on what the Prime Minister said.
This means people who are in Halifax that burn oil are going to have a program where we're going to pay $250 to incentivize you to join it, and we're going to give you a free heat pump to actually save energy on your home heating bill. I don't see how this is a problem. Yes, the overall aggregate of the price rebate might come down slightly for a year. Remember that price increase
for 3 years.
For 3 years. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're delivering a program that's actually going to help people make that transition. And that's what the Prime Minister talked about very clearly in his remarks.
But he also billed this as an affordability measure today. So if the cost goes down and the rebate goes down, those people aren't actually further ahead.
We're saving, there's people that are vulnerable in Atlantic Canada. 40% of the households in my province are still on home heating oil, and we're offering people solutions. If you don't have an ability to change behavior, then the policy can be punitive in a way, and that's what the Prime Minister said. We're delivering a program that's not only going to help people today by exempting the carbon price this winter, but at the end of the day, making sure we have programs to help make that transition long term to be more affordable than what they're paying right now just on the regular market price of home heating oil.
There's going to be criticism and pushback on this, that you're creating, when you create exemptions to a tax policy that is meant to send a market signal to force people to change behavior. You set a bad precedent, and maybe the better policy solution is to increase rebates as a way of helping people who have no market option as they do in, say, some of rural parts of Atlantic and the rest of Canada. So what do you say to people that this is an undermining and a watering down of a signature environmental policy?
David, you're from Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's funny, when I was listening to some of the national media today, they said, well, is this a walk back on climate? Absolutely not. This is about adjusting a national policy to ensure there's equity across the country. It's part of the reason why, as a rural member of Parliament, I push for a higher rural rebate, to your point, about making sure that there is an ability to recognize the lived differences. On the carbon price as it relates, and exempting on home heating fuel. We're not exempting forever. We're doing 3 years, and then I could maybe agree with the premise of saying that we were stepping back if we didn't put a program that actually helps on the supply side to get people incentivized to change behavior and actually do it. And so this is not a step back on climate whatsoever. That is a narrative that is going to be driven maybe from certain parts of the country that don't understand regional differences.
But you say 40% of households in Nova Scotia are still on oil. Correct?
That's correct.
Is that the correct number?
Approximately.
I had an oil tank on my house in St. John's when I lived there, and it was insanely expensive when oil was up. It was like $600-800 a month to heat your house. That's a lot of heat pumps that need to be installed in a place where they may not have the people who can do it.
Yep.
This is one of the limiters on this transition in the smaller and more rural areas. So how do you overcome that obstacle to achieve this policy goal in 3 years to do heat pump installations at scale?
Well, you exempt for 3 years to give time for the policy to work out. You partner with provinces like Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, who are going to be able to work to be able to do and deliver this program. And we'll reevaluate it in 2026. If there's a need to make further adjustments at that time, we'll deal with it. But at the end of the day, today is great news for Atlantic Canadians, indeed Canadians from across the country, particularly rural Canadians, where I think the government has done a great thing where they've listened to the program and the policies that are in place, made adjustments to better reflect regional and rural realities, and then also put programs in place to help people make a transition to fight climate change and affordability at the same time.
Just one last question on the politics of all of this. There's no change in the clean fuel standard, so gas prices are still going to go up, and I know that's an issue.
You got to give me time for this, David. So look, we saw a question on that to the Prime Minister. A couple things I would say. The premiers have talked about that in Atlantic Canada. What they don't talk about is the clean energy projects that are actually happening. If the premiers want to come in and cut the motive fuel tax to actually help ensure that that policy does not actually result in increased costs at the gas pump, they can. These are also regulated utilities, and I think we're always going to be willing to work with different provinces and entities to ensure that there's fairness and equity.
Okay, Cody Blois, thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cody Blois, the chair of the Liberal Atlantic Caucus.